Hello, everyone. I am going to show you today how we might be able to check for a leak, an intermittent leak from the toilet tank. Uh, so basically, what happens is with an intermittent leak, you'll find that the water starts to fill in the tank every so often, even when you don't flush it. And typically, what that means is there is a leak somewhere which is letting the water out of the tank until such time that the float inside the tank drops far enough, and then the water starts to fill into the tank again. So let's look inside the toilet tank at this point. Just going to lift the top off and place it down here. Now, as you can see inside, the major components within the toilet, and these are pretty much the same across all brands of toilets. This area here, you see, this is the what's called the fill valve. So whenever this float goes down, water will start filling into the tank. This here, the red piece, that's called a flapper or a flush valve. And typically, when you pull the chain or pull the flush, this lifts the flapper up until such time that the water exits the tank completely and fills the bowl. The third component to this is this little tube that you see here. And this is called the overflow tube. So if for any reason, let's say this float stopped working or this valve did not stop filling water, that water is going to go through the overflow tube continuously until such time that and basically it'll keep the level within the tank such that it doesn't overflow from the tank. So just to demonstrate that, I'm just going to allow it to fill up to that point, and you'll see here that it starts to flow into the overflow tank. And this is one of the continuous leak situations that you might find. So if, let's say, the water is just flowing out continuously, then you'd hear a sound as if a tap is running, or water is just flowing out continuously. Anyway, so those are the components of the toilet. So today what we're looking at is a possible leak from the flush valve. The reason that flush valve might leak, in fact, there are two reasons that I can think of at this point, which is one, the valve itself is worn out. So if this is worn out, it could get warped. It may not sit properly on the seat at the bottom, creating a watertight seal. And if that happens, then the water is going to find a gap to leak through and keep emptying into the bowl. The second possibility is this chain. So for example, if you had just replaced the flapper, you would be attaching this back to the lever. Now the length of this chain becomes critical. So if the chain is too long, there's a possibility that can get trapped between the seat and the flapper when the flapper is pulled up. That would again leave a gap which allows the water to go through. All right, so having identified what type of problems we might encounter, let's look at the next steps as far as diagnosing if this flapper is indeed leaking at this point. So as we do that, the first thing that I need to do is basically to allow the water. I would basically go ahead and flush it once and let it fill in completely. So what's going to happen at this point is the water is going to reach up to a certain level before it stops. And what I've done is to identify the level of the fill, I took a pencil and I put that little mark across the back side of the tank to mark the level at which the water is going to fill, right? So right about there. Now the next step is to basically turn off the water supply. And I can do that one of two ways. The more cumbersome way is to bend down and reach the supply valve, turn it clockwise, and that would stop the flow. The second approach, and this is something that is usable if the design of this thing allows you to do that, is to just take a pencil, stick it under this lever that attaches to the float, and set it in such a way that even if you were to press on this float, you'll notice that the lever will not move down. Basically, that means water is not going to fill in the tank, right? So with this done, the water supply has been shut off, and all we have to do is wait a little while to see if by any chance the level of the water drops from the mark that you placed against the back. Depending on how severe the leak is or how small the leak is, you might notice this within 5 minutes if it's a big leak. If it's a very, very small leak, you can probably notice something maybe in about an hour, a couple of hours. It all depends. So that's situational, and you just use your judgment on determining if and when there's a leak. Assuming that this leak is confirmed, so we're going to do something. I mean, the replacement or the resolution of this issue is actually quite simple. All it needs is for you to replace that little red piece and reattach the chain back to here. In order to remove this, all you do is detach or lift this off the pivot point here. So you lift it on this side and as well as on the other side, and this whole valve can be taken out. It is connected by this chain to this lever. So what you're going to do is remove this hook off of the lever, and once you do that, this whole thing can now come out. This flapper can come out. To find a replacement, all you do is take that flapper down to your hardware store, and they can help you identify exactly what size it is and what type of a flapper you need, etc. Now these flappers come in a variety of sizes. This one is a 2-inch. You could also have a 3-inch, which is a larger flapper. Sometimes, depending on the brand, for example, American Standard and Kohler, they make a different kind of a device. There's a cylindrical piece which actually moves up and down, and it sits on a valve or a seat which is circular, and the valve itself happens to be a thin circular rubber strip that sits at the bottom of the cylinder. So again, the damage occurs the exact same way. They're all rubber parts, and over time with the chlorine in the water, they tend to deteriorate, and as they deteriorate, the stiffness changes, becomes more pliant, more flexible, and basically when you operate them, they may not sit back correctly in their original place, right? All right, so assuming that you have now placed that thing back, place the flapper back, and you've reattached this. The one thing that I would point out is this chain, the length of this chain is important. So what we are trying to do is give it a little bit of slack, but at the same time, not too much of a slack that allows the chain to get trapped under the flapper. So the typical measure that I use is maybe about a 1/2 to 1 inch of slack. So if you press down on here, see if the flat portion of the chain is about a 1/2 to 1 inch, and that should be sufficient. Everything else should work out fine because it's just that one little piece that gets replaced. It would be wise to actually go through and run the same test again, which is turning off the water supply and waiting a little while to check if the level drops. And the reason we do that is just to make sure that whatever replacement work that you did was done correctly. The valve fits exactly. There's no other point of leak on the seat. And the length of the chain and everything else, they are correct so that the valve functions exactly as it's supposed to. One other possibility of damage could be with the seat that this valve actually sits on, this little circular thing on the bottom of the tank. That's the seat. Now, just like this gets worn out, the seat could also get worn out, leaving some rough edges, and that might allow water to leak through. So if that's the case, what you can do is you can just take a nylon scrubber, or something that would allow you to just smoothen out that area. That might fix it. If that doesn't, then you might be looking at replacement of this attachment, which is this tube all the way down to the seat. So in that instance, what you do is they sell you a kit. If you go to the hardware store, they'll sell you a kit that would actually fit exactly there. 3 bolts or 2 bolts, depending on the situation or the type of tank that you have. These 3 bolts, once you remove them, you'd lift up the thing, unscrew the nut that holds it down, take this one out, put the new one in, connect the new bolts back in place to hold the tank against the toilet, and that would be the way you do that. Depending on your skill level, it could take a little while, or maybe you're not too comfortable with that, in which case you might just call in a plumber to have you have you fix this problem. But anyway, this is just I guess it's not really a very short video, but at least hope it helps in allowing you to identify exactly the source of the leak, if it is in this toilet or if it's in a different toilet, etc. Once you're done, you could basically use this pencil, or turn on the valve, water flows back into the tank, and hopefully it stops where that mark is, and then we will be done with the testing and the replacement. I hope this helps. These instructions were provided to you as part of the communication you received from the property management. If you have any questions on any of these steps, you can certainly post them at the bottom, and I'll try to respond the best I can to help you with it. You are also welcome to call property management, and they can actually walk you through some of these steps as well. So good luck with the troubleshooting, and I hope this works out for you. Thank you so very much.